I'm recreating 3 iconic shots from Blade Runner 2049, all here in my garage. But my garage isn't very big. And all these shots were done by building huge sets in massive studios with tons of gear, people, and money. So instead, I'm going to build miniature versions of these sets and then combine them with full-sized people and VFX to see if I can recreate these iconic shots all at home. These videos take a long time to make, so this is the shot we're recreating for this video. And to build this whole room as a miniature, first we need to know our scale. Miniatures are measured in a scale ratio, which is this set of numbers here. A miniature of this scale would be 1/12 the size of the original, which means that every foot on the full scale is 1 inch on the miniature. This is to make sure everything matches up proportionally once you scale down. Of course, that only works if we know the measurements of this shot, which we don't. And that's why I got my brother Matt to help me.
So the height of the room is 12 feet.
12?
Yes.
The best we can do is make estimates.
With heels, the actress is approximately 6 feet tall.
Based on all the shots and behind-the-scenes footage we have of this room.
Using that as a ruler, we can determine other dimensions around the room.
I think this room is longer than it is wide.
At least 4 feet, probably more.
You're saying 24.
It's actually about a third of the room.
And therefore
31 feet.
31 feet. But we're only guessing.
Or is that just the lens being screwy again?
See, that's the hard part. The reality is that if we start building and we're wrong about these estimates, then we'd only know at the very end when everything is built and it's on camera. And that might mean we'd need to take the whole miniature apart and start all over. We did this wrong. And that's why we're not just gonna trust our estimations, we're gonna actually prove them by building a cardboard version of the miniature first. And once we know it looks good on camera,
this is actually really big,
then we build it out of wood. Which, do you have any concerns with us building it out of cardboard?
Should I?
Should we?
Well, I'm more concerned that you're building it out of wood next.
What happens if we do like a 1/6 scale?
It would be difficult to pull off a 1 in 6.
We're building it at 1/6 scale, which is big.
There's no way this all holds up. It's just because things are so big.
It's
4 feet wide, 2 feet tall, 6.5 feet deep, 80 square feet of wood.
Right.
We can build this out of cardboard, but just like half the size. That's really similar.
But we have to because of detail and specifically water caustics. This is water caustics. You might have seen something like this at the bottom of a swimming pool, and it's what happens when light passes through water, which is what's happening in this shot. And we actually have experience doing this effect from a past video. Almost exactly 1 year ago, we tried 3 different methods of getting water caustics in my living room, with some frustration. We need the light higher and that thing higher. Oh crap, the C-sands need to separate. Ah, suck a duck. My answer is that it is not worth it. But it taught us a lot about water caustics. And that's why I'm concerned about the lighting. The biggest takeaway from that video was that the smaller the light source, the clearer the caustics. Just like how closing the aperture on a lens brings everything more into focus, the same applies here. But just like with closing the aperture, it means the light becomes darker. So the smaller we make this miniature, the smaller the light source needs to be, and the darker the final shot. That's why we're building this thing 1/6 scale. Anything smaller just might not work. And after doing a lighting test on the cardboard miniature,
Freaking fish tank.
it looks like we're gonna need to build our own tank this time. So another box.
I think if I do it like this.
But this one has to be waterproof. 1 year ago, all we did was the caustics effect because I thought this shot would be impossible for us to recreate. But in 2024, we recreated every Best Picture nominee, built full-scale sets, and played around with miniatures. This is a chance to see how far we've come. 1 year later, and I think we're ready. By the end of the day,
1, 2, 3.
We had the supports built, most of the pieces measured, and the fish tank ready to test tomorrow. That was on January 4th. Given 1 week, I thought we probably could have the whole miniature built, so January 11th is the due date.
It's looking pretty alright so far.
Yeah, it's working really well. Like this.
Ah!
Oh, there's a leak.
Well, that's legitimately disappointing.
The leading theory was that the bottom sheet of acrylic was probably too thin. Under the weight of the water, it bent, and that meant all the edges broke their seal.
Is this stuff waterproof?
It's like it's dissolving, yeah.
It said it was waterproof.
Inconvenient, but should be a pretty easy fix. We just needed a piece of acrylic that wouldn't bend.
This looks to me like a job for Flex Tape Clear.
It's beautiful. Haha. There it is.
We'd reseal it, and then we have to let it dry again before we can try again. I did not mean to rhyme there. So we won't know this will work until the day that we need to shoot. And then we had a lot of building ahead of us. The first step was to build a support system. Next, we'd attach boards on the inside of the supports for our walls, floor, and ceiling. We had to make these boards the right size, and that meant a lot of We'd then cut out a hole in the ceiling for the water caustics. We need a way to support the water tank above the miniature, and that's another reason for this support system. We'd add 4 beams around the opening of the hole, dispersing the weight of the water and supporting the tank safely. At least, that's the idea. There's a lot left to do before we know if that will work. There was a lot of wood to cut, and I was stuck doing it alone. That took like 30 minutes, just these 2 pieces. We found earlier in the project that a saw caused the wood to splinter. So we had to, by hand, use a knife to score each board several times over, and then snap the piece off, which took me all day. This is a lot of work to be doing on my own. I'm gonna do more. Since we were doing this all by hand, it meant there was some potential for human error. So for everything to fit, we had to file down the edges of every piece. You get the idea. So while we did that, I needed to get some help for all of the miniature furniture pieces. And I had one person in mind for the job. Anna has been working with me from the very beginning. She made the nuke for Oppenheimer, built this set for Barbie, and built this miniature for the Batman. Basically, she's really crafty, and so she makes some of my impossible ideas into reality. And I had a lot of work for her to do this time. She's making this whole table by hand, which involved glue, painting, and making these little nubbins. She's making this side table, 3D printing that one and adding a reflective tabletop. There are these 2 statues in the back, and she found us a mini tea set, and of course all the texturing on the wood. And she determined that these 2 chairs would be best if 3D printed, so we found the exact model online, printed them, sanded them, and painted them. As for the rest of us, we spent the rest of the day filing down edges and nailing down boards. It was getting late, and everybody had to go home except for me and my behind-the-scenes guy, Ethan. But it was all starting to take shape.
Oh yeah!
I just had a few final pieces left before we'd call it a day.
Hammer this in.
But remember earlier when I mentioned human error?
It should have been obvious. This isn't gonna work. There's a big in the way.
I had measured the distances between the supports wrong.
Oh, that's really bad.
And that meant that there was a support beam in the middle of the skylight.
every single frickin' nail needs to basically come out.
At the time, I was really frustrated. But it's funny to see now. It's late.
It's almost 1 a.m. actually.
Yeah. We just fixed all of our mistakes. If there's a lesson to learn here, it's measure things correctly. What we had left to do were just finer details, but they all needed to happen before we could put the miniature together. Because of how big this miniature is, we decided to leave the walls removable so that we'd have easy access to the inside of the miniature once it's built. That way we could make changes or add furniture later. We also decided to build the ceiling as a separate piece that we could then add onto the miniature later, which made building it a whole lot easier. But because of all that, we had all these individual pieces that we were working on, so we didn't know what the miniature was going to look like. It was getting late, and we were getting tired, and there was no way we were still going to be able to film on the 11th. But I was determined to end the night by finally seeing our miniature built.
This is really great. Oh wow, that's cool. That's really cool.
But we still had a long way to go. Yeah, it's just a big wooden box so far. So maybe it's a good time that we talk about the other part of this shot, the people. The best way to get real people into a miniature shot is compositing. Basically, we'd film someone on a green screen and then place them into the miniature shot. But for everything to line up right, we need a lot of space. And like I said before, we're going to be doing this all here in my garage. So we'll open the garage door, put the camera outside, and make sure to use the same lens we've been using to film the miniature. The Dizio Film Artlist 14mm. Dizio Film sent me out their Artlist series lenses for these Blade Runner videos, which is honestly perfect. The Artlist series has this cleaner, sharper look to them, which better matches the cleaner, sharper look of Blade Runner 2049. Most of the lenses in the series also have a larger aperture of t1.4, so they do great in low light and give you some excellent bokeh. We'll cover the back wall with a green screen, light it, and then place a chair in the middle of the room, just like in the original. But in order for the compositing to work, we're gonna need to light the actress like she's in the miniature, and that would be very difficult to do with water. Luckily, in our caustics video, we tested a much easier alternative method that worked pretty well: Mylar. Mylar is a type of plastic film you might know better as a space blanket. It's very reflective, so if you move it around, and you point a light at it, it sort of looks like water caustics. Sort of. So we'll probably rig the Mylar to the ceiling, point my Amran 300C at it, which is my brightest light, and then point a fan at the Mylar to get it moving. From there, it's all just simple compositing. So let's get back to the bigger task, wrapping up this miniature. In programming, there's something called the 90-90 rule. The 90-90 rule states that the first 90% of the work will take the first 90% of the project time. And the last 10% of the work, well, it will also take 90% of the project time. It's less of a rule and more like a joke. Due to unexpected problems at the end of a project.
Their skylight has a larger opening.
Like needing to fix mistakes.
So we did that wrong.
You underestimate just how long something will take. Although it's a rule in programming, I think it applies to a lot of things. Over the next few days, we still didn't have the miniature finished. In fact, it had barely changed since the 10th. But at least the seal on the tank seemed to be holding up.
I think maybe this is good. That's just because...
It took another full week before we were ready to film the miniature. First step of the day, it's finally time to see those water caustics. Two weeks of measuring, cutting, building, all for this moment.
That's sick. That is what we're looking for.
We didn't have a moment to waste.
You see
There was a lot to do if we wanted to get the shot today.
that's one option. The other option,
We weren't done
I
yet,
think the base might be something.
but we were very close.
We'd build the top piece, you would just print everything except the top piece.
Okay.
Oh, it's a leak? Oh, we gotta get the water out. It's leaking faster and faster, we gotta get it out now.
Yeah, we didn't film on the 17th. I had actually thought that this shot would be the easiest of the three that we were recreating. But because of all the things we knew how to do, I completely overlooked all the things that we didn't. However, making mistakes is how we learned, how we got here. So let's look at that shot again. First mistake to fix, the water tank. You might have been thinking, why not just use a clear plastic container?
Oh man, it's close.
Well, I'd look pretty dumb then for going through all that work with the acrylic just for a plastic container to work fine.
It's too cloudy. That sucks.
Oh, thank goodness. So instead, we used silicone to seal our tank. And just like before, we'll need to let this dry before we know if it'll work. So let's take another look at the lighting. There was something that was bothering me about our lighting setup. I figured they were using two lights. One in the center covering most of the set, and then one pointed at the back wall to get that shape of light. We hadn't gotten to the second light or the dividers yet, but it looks like we were on the right track. What was bothering me though were the shadows. Shadows are one of the best ways to reverse engineer a lighting setup. And the pattern of the shadow on the skylight just wasn't matching up.
The lighting on this is so different.
More than that, there's this big patch of shadow in the middle of the room that we don't have. I knew we must have been doing something wrong. And then it hit me. It's not two lights. It's four. We'll replace the center light for two Amran 100Xs on either side pointed at the side walls. We'll take our Amran 300C and point it towards camera from the back. We'll use an Amran 60X pointed at the back wall, add the dividers, and that's the pattern. Of course, we still need the water caustics. So while our tank kept drying, Anna kept working on the furniture, and we added some details to the miniature. Then it was the moment of truth.
Okay, you ready? I'm ready.
Time to test our water.
Yeah.
Too late.
I'm doing it anyway.
Oh, this is just like a moment of truth.
It's fine.
Wow.
I know, right?
All right, I guess that works. So yeah, let's move on. There were still lots of little adjustments to make with the lighting before we had it right. But like I said before, we knew how. How to get clearer caustics by making the light source smaller. How we'd need to build the miniature at 1/6 scale to have the light we needed. How to measure everything to make sure it matched. How we could easily use Mylar for the full-scale shot. We knew how to do this shot. Over the past 2 years since I started doing these recreations, I've learned so much, met so many new people, and had this growing team. And we've had a blast recreating shots from movies. It's always a ton of work to put into a 5-second shot, but we do it because we love it. There we go.
You look lonely.
We have one shot left, so subscribe to see us finish this project.